Welcome to another episode of the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Brianna, and I am excited about today's show. We have a special guest who has joined us, and we are going to be talking about reframing our thoughts and our beliefs. Sometimes we are thinking wrong, sometimes our belief system is a little off, and so we're just going to kind of dive into that topic. And I'm going to let our guest introduce herself and tell us all about her, and we're going to dive right into it.
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Allison Body. I am a domestic abuse survivor. In April of 2017, I was actually dead for 33 seconds. And that experience really kind of woke me up. I came back with a new purpose, and my purpose is to help other women through their trauma. And during my trauma healing, in preparing myself to help others, one thing I noticed was the biggest thing holding me back was actually some of my thoughts and my beliefs. And so that's something I'm excited to share with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Domestic violence is something that is near and dear to my heart because I am a survivor. I have family members that are survivors and friends and things of that nature. And so I want you to, if you can, tell us a little bit about your story as much as you feel comfortable with, because a lot of times we can't get to a place of understanding until we understand a person's story.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if you could just give us a little bit of your story.
Yeah, of course. So my story is a long one, so I'll try to make it succinct for you guys today. I was married to a gentleman who was very emotionally and mentally and physically abusive. And he was a master manipulator, is what I called him. He would be one way in front of everybody else, and then a whole nother way at home, which is very common for a lot of domestic abuse. And um, during that entire time, my entire family believed his outside persona. They didn't believe anything I told them. And it was, it put me onto an island where I really was by myself. No one believed me. No one was really supportive. When I wanted to get divorced, it for them and the religious side of things, they did not support that because once you're married, you're married. Like that was their beliefs, and I don't fault them for that. But it created a environment where I didn't feel like I could escape, and so I felt like this was just going to be my life, and I had to figure out how do I cope with this. And it honestly, what it did is it completely destroyed all of my self-confidence, all of my self-worth. I started believing the things that he was telling me. I started to believe that I was the problem, like I must be the problem. And because everyone's saying that he's this great guy, and so that must be what it is. And so for a couple of years, actually, I kind of lived under that belt of like trying to just make myself align with what he wanted me to be. And even still, I couldn't be what he wanted to be. And he wanted me to give him kids. I didn't want kids, but then felt pressured to have kids with him. And I have fertility problems. And so on top of all of that, that became like, it was my fault. I was preventing that, kids from happening. And it was this very bad cycle of just, there's nothing I could do. And the punishments, both, verbally and physically from that. And when I tried to escape, finally, I got to the point where I'm like, this isn't right. Like regardless of what I might believe in myself, I know that I don't deserve to be married to this man. And so I tried to escape to my family back in Seattle. At the time, I'm living in Savannah, Georgia. And my mom was very supportive. She finally kind of understood and saw, because she came and actually lived with us for a couple of months and saw a little bit of the other side. And of course, because my mom was living with us, he wasn't always excuse my language, an asshole, but he had his moments, and she started to see the other side of him. And so she was supportive. She helped transport me back to Seattle. I had 2 dogs though, so I couldn't actually stay with her because her apartment wouldn't allow the dogs, and my siblings didn't want me around. They saw me as a risk to their family, so they had their own kids. They didn't want to house me. I even had one sibling completely write me off of I don't want you near me. I don't want you near my kids. And to this day, we still do not really talk, because I was the risk. I was the equation in all of this that was bringing this negativity and this harm to the family. And so when he did come to Seattle, because he did come to Seattle, of course, I had nowhere to go. I literally was homeless. I didn't have any money to be able to get my own place. I had nowhere I could actually hide from him. And so I went back home with him. And unfortunately ended up getting pregnant when we got back home. And during that time, like, he was only nice to me because I was carrying his child. And it got to a point in that first trimester where I knew something was wrong. I was having pain all the time, and I wanted to go to the hospital and get it checked out. He refused to bring me to the hospital. And then it was actually a Saturday on April 8th of 2017. I woke up at 7:30 in the morning. I remember that because it was so impactful. I felt a huge just pop inside of my body and was screaming in pain. He refused to take me to the ER. He kept yelling at me, telling me to, shut up and go back to bed, that I'm just trying to kill his child. And I was honestly for about 4 hours, because we didn't leave for the ER until 11:30. So for 4 hours, I was in a lot of pain, screaming. I knew something was wrong, but he just would not take me to the hospital. And he finally agreed to take me, but he would not help me to the truck. I couldn't even sit up. I basically had to crawl to his truck and crawl to get into the truck. He wouldn't help me out of the truck. In his mind, I was just trying to put on this show to kill his child. And we got to the ER. They believed him. They thought, there's nothing serious. Like, you're, just blowing this out of proportion. He made it sound like I'm just this, drama queen. And I wasn't even taken back into the, the ER. I was in the waiting room. So I was taken back around 4 o'clock, and then sat in that room, and he was joking with the doctor. I remember this very vividly, just joking with the doctor about what a drama queen I am. And, the doctor was joking around, oh, women. I'm like, no, like, there's something wrong with my body. There's something wrong with this. Like, I didn't want to be pregnant in the first place. And now, like, I'm in this situation where I'm in a lot of pain. I know something's wrong. So by the time that they actually did finally get me back, they did the ultrasound and found that the baby was ectopic and that it had imploded. And so I was bleeding internally this entire time. So by the time that they even got me on the operating table, I ended up bleeding out on the table, and was dead for 33 seconds. And, coming back, having to get a full blood transfusion and all of that, it was an eye-opener. And I knew that I was in this battle alone. Unfortunately, I had my mom's support, but from that point on, I stopped being what he needed me to be. And it was a fight. It was a more mental, verbal, everything fight. But I knew that I needed to leave. And it got to the point where he just wasn't happy with me. Like, I, wasn't what he wanted anymore. And so was luckily able to get out of that marriage, and and unfortunately had to agree to take on the debt in order for him to even sign the divorce papers. But it was one of those situations where it got to the point where of me dying to understand this isn't right, and I need to fight back because I deserve more than that. And so, coming through all of that and kind of coming on the other side of things is realizing that it all comes down to our mental capabilities and what we believe in ourselves and what we believe is right for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think that your story is filled with so much framing of beliefs of other people. We had did a show the other day, and we talked about trauma, and we talked about core values and how sometimes our core values are actually influenced by the beliefs of other people, and we don't have the capacity to even understand that, their beliefs don't necessarily have line up with what we really feel at the core of who we are, but because we have been learned that ours going against what they believe is actually sin, because you're coming from a religious background, right? And so that God will be angry with you. Stories like this are all over the place, where women aren't as fortunate as you, and they don't make it out because the church is so adamant about them staying in a marriage that it is physically and mentally abusive. and it's like, don't leave, God to fix it. And I'm a firm believer that God is not a God that wants us to stay in something that is harmful to us. Why would I want to serve a God that's like that? You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I agree.
So a lot of what you've said, I know a lot of our listeners are listening right now and saying, wow, they have heard a lot of what you just said. He
Mhm.
don't leave. He's good to you. He's a good provider. He's this, because people don't see the inside. They don't live with you. So they don't actually know. All they see is the pretender that comes out when everybody
Mhm.
else is around, but then you have to go
Yeah.
home and be with that person, and that
Mhm.
is a scary place to be. You lost your family in the midst of this, so one of your siblings you're not talking to now, and I think that's sad. But it's the reality of things, because people do feel as though, hey, you are the cause of this, you're the cause of that, not having enough empathy or compassion to understand that, hey, I'm in something that I don't necessarily desire to be in, but I don't know how to get out,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
do support. So tell us. So once you got out and you began to reframe how you think, and began to do the self work, tell us about that portion of your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of like many of us, I started with therapy. And um in therapy, and I don't mean this in a mean way for my counselor that I was working with, but they were kind of asking things of like, well, what did you do that kind of put you in that situation? I'm like, me. This isn't a me problem. Like, you need to help me through my trauma of it. And like like I said, when I came back with fire. And that's kind of piggybacking off of what you had said of like, God is, for us to help us. Like, I don't remember the other side, but why else would I come back with fire to help others and to leave that? Like, I fully believe that God wants the best for us and that we don't have to stay in those relationships. But so for me, like, I started with with therapy and talking about it, and I already went through the worst fear, and that was leaving him. And so talking about the fear and the trauma wasn't as bad. And so found that the therapy I was going through wasn't helping me, because I was always asking like, well, what did you do? Like, what parts of you can you fix because of what you went through? And I'm like, well, I just need to get through this therapy, like, or and improve my mind. So I did a lot of research. I changed my education to be more of the coaching side of things. Ended up becoming a national certified health coach, and a lot of those principles from coaching um, also apply to the therapy end and the trauma side of things. It's just a different scope of practice. And so I kind of dived in a little bit more of like, I love self-help. I'm like the queen of self-help, and I love to research. I'm one of those people. I'm always going to be a forever student because I just love to learn. And so I really dived into not just coaching, but like that whole principle of behavior change, and what do you need to do in order to create that behavior change. Because in my mind, from that trauma, I needed to create a behavior change. I needed to change my mindset. I needed to change my lifestyle. I needed to change essentially everything about myself, from the abused wife now to this liberated woman trying to make a change. And it all came down to my mindset. Our minds are so powerful. And so a lot of the research I found talks about how trauma actually changes our brain. It changes our wiring. It changes how we think. And what it does is it actually puts us in a fight or flight mode constantly. We're always afraid of something. We are always worried about something. We're always prepared for that fight or flight. And because of that, our cortisol levels are super, super high. And it makes it so we can't like have proper cognitive abilities. Um, and it also causes all of these health effects. So we ended up, losing, or rather gaining weight, getting diabetes, having heart problems, because the cortisol actually breaks down our body tissue. And so all of our digestive and all of our system starts to break down. And it all comes back to our mind, and our mind's super powerful. And what we think will be. And so I kind of really leaned into that principle, and went through and I got my Therapeutic of Art life coaching certification, which all was very centered around changing our thoughts, our patterns, and our beliefs in ourselves, and using art as a tool for that. And essentially, it's learning to rewire our thinking process. Because of our trauma, we're always, one, stressed, and two, think of the absolute worst of ourselves. Our confidence is low. We have no self-worth. We believe that we can't do anything. And so it starts with just using those reframes of thoughts of, I can do this. It's going to be hard, but I can. And changing the can't to cans, or I'll try to I will. And I know, we'll always laugh about that, because I remember that in high school of like, oh, that's hunky stuff. Like, that's not actually going to work. It's true, because what we tell ourselves over and over is actually what we'll believe. And so another study I found, which is about visualization, had a whole study with all these different athletes in different sports using just 30 minutes of visualization for their event, like right before their event. And they found that, like, without changing anything about their workout routine, their performance improved by 30% just by mentally thinking about what they wanted to achieve. And it's the same thing with our goals. So we need to think and visualize what we want to achieve, have that be the forefront of what we're doing and what we're thinking about, having little sticky notes to remind you, and constantly saying it. Those affirmations really do work. And then slowly our thoughts will start being more positive. We're going to start believing in ourselves more. And then our beliefs will follow, and thinking that we are capable of this, like we are worth so much more, and that you are confident. And so it's this cascading event.
And when we think about the reframing of our minds and our thoughts, what I like to tell my clients is that when you begin to feel something within your body, you need to sit with it and identify, where is it coming from? Why am I feeling like this? Where is it coming from? And then really realizing, is the fear, if it's fear of something, is it irrational fear? Is it something that really can happen? Or is this something that is triggering you to make you feel like it's going to put you back in the situation of where your trauma came from? And I think that helps with the reframing of the mind as well, because when we can get to a place where we can tell ourselves that, hey, this is not yesterday, this is not the same person, or this is not the same situation, and realizing that this is a moment, this moment is going to pass, and and really being able to disconnect our mind from the past events. You're not going to ever forget them, but you don't have to let them rule you, because our trauma oftentimes leads us, and it will guide us, and it will always, like you said, however you think, that's what you're going to end up living. That's how you're going to live. And so if you're constantly in that state of fear, you're going to constantly meet people that remind you of this person, or you're going to constantly go to places and it's going to remind you of whatever situation caused a trauma, or a room or something like that. And so, and that's an awful way to really live. It's an awful way to live. And like you said, it brings on so many different things. I worked in a hospital, and I would go in and do life reviews, and people would have high blood pressure, and because they lived their life in a state of fear, and low self-esteem, and always stressed out about something. Once they got to a place where they were able to release, process, and really just walk through these events, and have someone to give them permission to always, I love to people don't understand when I say you have to give people permission sometimes, to let it go. Give people permission to say, you know what, had nothing to do with me. That did not dictate that that did not mean I was a bad person. Just because they said I was doesn't mean I was. And so, but many times I would walk out of the rooms and get reports that their high blood pressure that they could never control finally went down. Their numbers for their when they would check their numbers for their diabetes, the numbers would go down. And it's all because they got to a place where they could face the trauma, release it, and realize that, you know what, I've been thinking wrong all these years.
Yeah, it's really true. And that actually makes you think about an exercise I do with a lot of my clients. It's called like the tabletop exercise, where you think of this belief, so, or your fear, or whatever your emotion you're going through as the tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
And then your evidence for that fear, that belief, or whatever you're thinking are the legs. And so you want to, one, what are the legs that support this fear, that support that negative thought? And a lot of times they'll come up with like 3, maybe 4 things. But then when we flip it, and then now they'll just figure out the legs that support why, like why you shouldn't be afraid, or why you are amazing. So essentially just reframing that thought of like, I'm afraid to live my life. Mm-hmm. Well, flip it. I deserve to live my life. What's those supporting evidence for that? And always, 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 when we really break it down, they have more legs supporting this positive belief than they do the negative one. And so it's easier for them to then kind of like, in a way, will actually create something that they destroy. So that way it's like that feeling of like, I'm getting rid of that belief of myself because I now have this new table and all of these legs that support this belief. And then just about reminding themselves of that belief or that, reframe.
Oh yeah. I think that's really good, because when you get to a place where, and I sticking that stupid rhyme, nursery rhyme, or whatever you call it, that they taught us in school, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And I'm like, that is such a lie, because words do hurt you. And so for every negative thing that has been told to someone, it takes 100 some positive words to come back to help get that one thing out. So my thing is, for people who have been going through, a similar situation that you came out of, them getting to the place of knowing that it's not your fault, and like you said, that exercise, I believe, would really, really be beneficial for them. I want you to tell the people, how can they get in contact with you? If you can give them your website address, it's going to be on the top of our page, but for those who are just listening on podcasts, if you can give it to them, so perhaps they can write it down and get in contact. Because I think you have a lot of good ideas. You have come through so much, and I mean, it's just wonderful to see where you're at right now, because you seem to have such a positive attitude. You're helping other people, and it can take years to get to where you're at, and some people really never get there, because your story really is filled with so much deep things that could have really destroyed you. You know what I mean? But you didn't. Survivor, you survived it, and you did the work that you needed to do, and now you're able to help so many other people. So you are like the poster board for, if I can do it, you can too.
Yeah, and it's so true. Everyone can do this, and I want to help women make that change a short amount of time as possible, because it did take me about 2 years to really get to the point that I started to have confidence again. And I went out there, I'm like, you know what? I am beautiful. I may not fit the models, but I am beautiful. I'm worth everything. I bring light to this world. It took me a while, and it shouldn't have to take 2 years to get to that. It's just a matter about having the support, the accountability, and the tools to do that. And that's what I'm here for. So I'm in the process of revamping my website. As I mentioned, I have my therapeutic art life coaching. So I actually create art using all of the exercises I go through, not just with my clients, but that I go through even with myself on a daily basis as a reminder and visual for myself. And I sell that. But my website is www.alliesbamworkshop.com. And that's ALLIESBAMWORKSHOP.com. And like I said, I'm revamping that. And Brianna, like I emailed you also, I am giving out free support, which that website is a very specific one just for your listeners. So I can't remember that off of the top of my head. So I'm so sorry. Please go and to her website and get that link, because you'll get a free copy of my book that brings you through all of the behavior change. It has not all, but most all of my exercises I use with my clients. This, like I said, I love self-help. This is like the ultimate self-help book. I'm giving it away for free. So please go there. Get that PDF for yourself And it will also have some of my contact information on that site as well.
Oh wow, that is awesome. Yes, I got the email, and I'm gonna post it for everybody to see. Again, if you're not on our Facebook page, please, 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 if you are listening to any of the major platforms that we are on for our just listeners and not not visual, please go to our Facebook page, the Healing Place Podcast, and you will find every link that you need to on there, to the free resources. And there's nothing better than to get resources from someone who's been there, done that. You know, it's a lot of people who are giving out information, but they haven't lived through it. So they don't even understand the emotions and the things that come with trying to heal. And so we have someone today that, again, I say, hats off to you. You are the definition of a survivor, and that you can make it. You can get to the other side. You can heal. You can have a wonderful life. Now, you told me something about you are in the process of doing therapeutic working with, is it horses?
Yeah. So I actually started a nonprofit, and it's a horse rescue, but our primary focus is in providing free equine assisted therapy to veterans and domestic abuse survivors. So horses are really interesting, and it's a lot different than any other animal out there because horses don't communicate like a dog does, for example. Horses communicate using energy, and one thing that they do with their herd is that there's an exchange of energy. So if a horse is scared or depressed or anything like that, they actually absorb that negative energy and then they release it. And it's the same thing with humans. And it's so fascinating to see, people who have all of this trauma built up go through this process of, like, they don't really even talk to me. I actually put them in a corral with the horse and just have them talk about anything that comes up. And then they always end up coming to their trauma because they feel comfortable with that horse. And the horse absorbs it and they release it by, I hate to say it, but going poop, rolling, shaking. So a lot of times you'll see that horse in with that person with their head on their chest and they're kind of shaking, absorbing that negative energy. And the person that goes in is so different than the person that comes out, because that person comes out feeling a lot more released, a lot more clear about what they need to do. It's fascinating.
I think that's fascinating. How the horses release it. I was speaking to a friend earlier on today, and I was saying that they were saying that they talk to a lot of people that are having very, very sad, devastating stories. And I said, you have to get to a place where you can learn to listen and then let it go. And I think we as people need to learn how to listen, to absorb, and then let it go, because it's not ours to carry.
Yeah,
We just there
completely.
to help. So again, everybody, please go to her website, look at the links. If you again, go to Facebook if you're not on there, subscribe, go to YouTube. We're on YouTube as well, the Healing Place Podcast, and you'll find every link that you need. And don't leave without your free resources. Don't leave without even going and trying to enlist some help if you are in need of help. Always try to get help from those who have been there. I try to stress to everybody that, there's a lot of people, again, that are out here and they're telling you things, but they have not experienced. Experience is the greatest teacher. It makes it more real, and it makes the person who's coming alongside you even that more compassionate, sympathetic, and empathetic towards what you're going through. So again, I thank you for joining us. I thank our listeners for joining us for yet another episode of the Healing Place Podcast. I love you as always, and I will see you on next week. Thank you.